Hi all, this is Usman from Coding Lore, and in this course I will cover everything related to one of the best table libraries out there, Tanstack Table. Okay, so in this course we will be building this table. As you can see, this table has a lot of features, so we can do different things. Like for example, I can hide certain columns, I can hide all columns, show all columns, etc. Then I can filter the table based on any search item I enter in this particular text field. Then I can select all rows or select particular rows and then do something with it. Then I can expand or collapse a certain row to display more information about the row. Then I can delete rows if I want using this delete button. I can also reorder columns if I want. So this would change the order of the columns. If I want, I can sort a particular column in an ascending or descending order. I can also pin a particular column to left or right, and then if I want to unpin a particular column, I can also do that. In addition to that, I have pagination enabled, so I can go to the last page, first page, I can go to the next and previous pages using these buttons, and we'll implement each functionality using Tanstack Table, which has a very easy API. So we'll see how we can use the Tanstack Tables API to make powerful tables like this. So if you want to learn how to make this table, stick around till the end of this video and you'll surely learn a lot. Okay, so now I have emptied everything in the project and you can see that I've got nothing here. I will build the table from scratch so that you can understand how this library works. So this library is a headless library, so basically it won't give me any UI components like the table component where I can pass props and it would, render the table. It would basically give me the functions which I can use to make the table, and like it would provide me the functions through which I can implement features like pagination, column visibility, etc. very easily. And the rest of the things, the markup for the table, the styling, everything would be custom, so that would be done by me. So basically this gives me the power of making the table like I want, and there is no limitation to that. So that is the power of it. The main thing we have got here is the useReactTable hook. If you have got some other library like Angular or something else, then you will have maybe some class in which you would pass these particular variables, but the API would be the same. In React case it's a hook, but you can follow along and the same API would be true for Solid, Angular, or any other framework you are working on. So these three properties are required. Data is obviously the data which would be shown on the table, and this would be an array of objects. So it can be an array of 5 objects, 10 objects, whatever, and those would be rendered as rows basically. Then columns, this is very important. This would basically define the columns which would be present in this particular table, and also inside the columns itself we will define what particular data you want to show in the table. So do you want to show a particular component, do you want to just show the text, etc. Everything would be present in these columns, and we'll look at it in a minute. And then get core raw model is just nothing special. We would import the get core raw model from the Tanstack Reactable library, and then we will just put it there because this is important for rendering the table. So first of all, we would use this table variable to map out the table so that when I'm defining columns, at least something is being shown on the UI. First of all, let's define the header. So for the header, I will do thead and then table, which I'm getting from the useReactTable hook. So get header groups, and then I'll map it. This would return me a header group, and then basically here I would return a tr. Now header group means that we can have multiple groups of headers, so one header group can have multiple columns, etc. and I will show you in a second when I will define columns. Here I will do header group dot headers dot map. This would give me a header, and here I will do return th actually, and then basically header dot is placeholder. So a header can be a placeholder as well. It's not always necessary that that particular header will have some text. So that is why we're checking that if it's a placeholder or not. So if it's a placeholder, then return null, otherwise flex render. So this particular function is necessary for showing the text on the header, and this function would be repeated in case of body and footer as well. So you will basically see a repetition of that. Header dot get context. You don't need to memorize it or anything, it's just how it is. So this would basically render the headers. Now for displaying the footer, we'll copy the same thing and change a few other things. So thead would become tfoot, and then get header groups would become get footer groups. Let's change this variable name to footer group. Let me change it here. Here I will rename it to footer, 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 and this would become footer as well. So basically this would render the footers on the table, and instead of th, let me change it to td. Now let's render the body. So for the body, it's simple: table.get row model dot rows dot map. We get a row, and then here I would return a tr because it's a row. Then inside it I would say row.get visible cells dot map, and here I'm getting the cell. So here return td. Inside this I will display the cell information. So let me copy this function. Here I would replace footer with cell, and this would basically show the body of the table. And I think I forgot, you have to pass some things here. So width would be equal to header dot get size. So we have the ability of specifying the size of the header in the columns, and that would basically come here, and we will basically change the width according to that. So that is why I'm adding it here. You will see it in action in a minute. So we also need to pass this column span in the th, so that if certain column span is coming from this library, we basically span our column. And that's our table mapping done. Now let's define the columns, which is the vital part of the table. So first of all, let me show you the data, because according to the data we'll define the columns, and you'll see in a minute how. So I am using faker.js to basically make random objects, and those objects would contain these properties. So user ID will be a string, name, email, avatar would be a random image URL, then password, birth date, registered at age. So these will be just randomly generated things, dummy data, and I'm generating right now 5 objects. So for the data, I will have an array of 5 objects, and this would be of user type. So this would be the type of user. Now I have passed this user type here, and you will see it in action when I will be defining the columns. This would make it easy for me to grab certain properties from the object so that I can display them on the columns, and you will see the advantages this library brings. So there are 3 types of columns. First type is accessor columns, then display, and then group. First of all, let me discuss what accessor columns are. So accessor columns are basically those columns which are used to show data on the UI. So right now I have objects, obviously, and those objects would have these properties which I just showed you. So user ID, name, email, etc. Accessor columns would basically show any data from this based on the column. I would use this column helper function, which I get from create column helper, and I'm passing this type generic of user, and that would help me in a second. So column helper dot accessor. So you can see accessor display group. So I want to make an accessor column, so I will say accessor, and the first param is the key. And now you can see that as I type this empty string, it is basically displaying me the properties, which are the properties of the user type, because I've specified the user type generic in the create column helper function here. So that's basically a pretty great feature. So I want to display the name, so I will say name here, then object. So here we have to specify some properties. So I want to give it an ID, then header. So what I want to show on the column header, so I'll say name with a capital N. You can see that the name column is displaying here, which is great. For the sake of understanding, I've also displayed the first object of the users array, so that you can actually see that whatever is being displayed here is actually coming from the data. So the first object has the name Samara D Amor, so that is what is present in the first row. Don't worry about the styling, we will style it once I go through the columns, and we'll make it better, don't worry. So it was this easy to just display the name column. Because I've used the name accessor here, it has determined that I want to show the name property of that object in this particular column. Pretty easy. Now let's say for another example, I want to show the email. So I will do email, and let me write email here in the header, and now you can see that it is displaying the email. This particular user had this email, and you can see that in the first row we are displaying this email. Great. We can also pass a function accessor. Right now obviously I'm displaying one string, so it is picking that particular value from that object based on the accessor key I've passed here, and it is displaying that. But what if in a certain column I want to display 2 properties or 3 properties? I can also do that by passing a function. So I'll pass a function here. I will get the user. So this user is of type user, because obviously for every row I will get the user, and because it is type safe, I can get the advantages of TypeScript. I can say user.name, and then I want to, after a space, show the email, and I want to, let's say, give it an ID of info and a header of info as well. And now you can see that for this particular column info, I'm displaying both the name and email. Now obviously you can see that it's not looking good because by default the column width is not enough for them to display all this information in one line. We can also control that. So I can pass a size property here, and let's say pass 300. Now you can see that it has expanded it a bit. Let's change it to 400. Now you can see that it is displaying the data in one line. And when I was mapping the table, you saw that I passed the header.get size here. So basically whatever size we define here, that size goes here, and based on that size I change the width. I don't want to show it right now, so let's remove it. Also, not all the time I want to display the same thing which is present in data. So right now, if I go to birth date, you will see that it is displaying the date in a particular format, because by default the date which is being created by Faker is of type JavaScript date, and it is formatting it, based on whatever format it wants to show. If I want to show something custom inside the cell for that column, I can use the cell property. So cell would get a component, and here I would get a prop get value, and then I can return something. I will use moment to wrap it. So get value would get me the particular value for birth date for each row, and then I'll say format ddmmyy. So basically this is the particular format in which I want to display date, and now you can see that it is displaying date in a particular format which I want, and not just the exact same thing that was present in the object. So that is great. Now I can also show some custom components like markups or something else in the accessor column as well. Right now, for every object I have an avatar property, and this avatar property has a random image URL. Now obviously I don't want to show the URL in the table, I want to show the image. So I can render an image component in the cell property for that column, and I can show the image. So let's do that. So I'll copy this, I will do avatar, let me paste it here. This would become avatar as well. Here cell get value, and then I want to basically return something. So I am using Chakra UI for all showing custom components and everything. You can use any library you want. So flex align items would be center, justify content would be center. Then inside that I will display an image component, and the source would be get value, and then the width would be, let's say, 50 pixel, height would be 50 pixel, border radius would be 50% so that it's rounded. And now you can see that I am also showing the image in this particular column. Great. Let's reduce it a bit to 30. Great, now it's looking better. So you can show custom components in the table as well in the accessor column. Great. Now basically this was the table we originally wanted to make. So let me add the columns that I originally wanted to add in the table. So ID, avatar, name, birth date, and age. So let's add them. So I also want to show the ID. So here I'll say simple ID, and this would become ID. Let me copy the avatar to after ID. Then I don't want to show the email, I want to show the age. So for age, simply age, and age. And now you can see that I'm displaying the data which I want. Now I can also add display columns. So display columns are basically columns which have got nothing to do with the data. So they don't display data, but they display something. Most of the tables have a column like the first column which has checkboxes which can be used to select a particular row. Most tables have column like this in this case, where they have delete icons which can be used to delete rows, and also plus icons which can be used to expand the rows. So these columns are known as display columns, which do not have anything to do with the data. They're not displaying any data, but they are displaying something which can be used to alter the table or do something else. So let's add the first display column. So I'll type display here. No need for this accessor because I'm not displaying anything. So let's display the ID. So for the checkboxes, because it is selecting the rows, I will use an ID of selection. For the header, I want to, in this particular case, display a checkbox. So I can also, instead of the string, pass a component. So here I'll say checkbox. In the cell, I also want to show a checkbox. So now if I go here, you can see that I'm displaying the checkbox. This is here for every row. Great. The functionality for selection and everything I would cover later in this course. Also, I want to display the delete icon. So let me add that here. So delete. Let me also center it. So I'll just say flex, justify content, center, align items, center. Let me pass this checkbox here. And also let me copy it here so that it looks a bit better. Yeah. So for the delete column here, the same thing. I would, instead of the checkbox, I will display a trash icon here. For the trash icon, you can use any library you want. I will use the React icons library. So in the header, I've displayed a trash icon. Here I want to display in the cell, display a button, a red button. So I will say icon button. Then area label would be delete row, and then icon would be the same icon, fa trash, and then color scheme would be red. So now you can see that I'm displaying an icon. It's big. Let me shrink it. Let me wrap it with flex container as well. Now I would add this plus column through the same process. Okay, so I've also added the expand column. It's simple. For the expand column, I'm not displaying any header. Personal choice, you can add it if you want, but I'm displaying a cell, again using flex to align it in the center, and then the icon button with the icon of plus. So I will add the logic for it later in the section when I would cover expansion. Okay, so I've seen how we can display the header, cell. Now you can also show the footer for a particular column, and we can do that in this particular section as well. So let me do that. We can do that in the accessor column portion. So I have the age column here. Maybe I want to show the sum of all the ages in the footer. So let's add that. So the footer would give us a component, and here we would get a table prop. I will do table.get filtered row model dot rows dot reduce. So basically I would use the reduce function to map over all the ages and then sum it. So I will get the accumulator and value here, and the initial value would be 0. Here I would say return accumulator, and the accumulator plus is equal to number val dot get value, and then I want to get the age. Now you can see that I have a footer here, which is the sum of all the ages. So this is how you can make a footer. Now one last type of columns is remaining, that is the group columns. So let's add a grouped column. So grouped column is basically a combination of display columns and accessor columns. So if I want to group any of these columns, any of two columns in one group, then I can do that using the group columns. So basically I will say column helper dot group, and then here I would pass an ID. So let's say info, then the header would be info, and then columns. So columns would be an array of columns. So if I, let's say, copy two columns, let me copy two columns here. Let's say name and birth date. If I copy those and I paste it here in the columns array, you will see that now name and birth date columns are under a header group info. I have removed the header group because most of the time it's not need. Also for operations such as reordering columns, etc., it becomes difficult when you have multiple rows of headers. So that's why I've removed that, but you can add it using this way. Now this table looks horrendous. Let's add styling to it, and I will not add some very complex styling, but still with just a little bit of CSS you will see how much beautiful this table gets. So let's add styling to this table. Okay, so I have the styling sheet here. First of all, the main thing, border collapse. Then for the header, I want to get it a background color of black and a color of white to make it more prominent. Then for the table cells, I want to give them a padding, so 12 pixels and 20 pixels, and I also want to align the text to center. Also for the rows, I want to add a border bottom so that the rows can be distinguished. So 1 pixel solid and then DDD. Now you can see that with this simple styling, like I didn't do a lot of stuff, it's just a few basic CSS rules, this table has been elevated to a pretty nice standard and the table looks beautiful. Now let's start adding features to this table, which is why we are using this library in the first place. Let's add sorting. Okay, so first of all, we want to add a row model here for sorting. So right now you can see that I have added a get go row model here. That's like the required thing to do. But in order to add sorting, I will do get sorted row model, and then I will add the get sorted row model from the ReactTable library. Now I would extract this th into a separate component, because in the header I will add a lot of different stuff like the ability to sort, the ability to pin columns, the drag and drop logic, etc. So it is better that this particular th tag is a separate component. So let's do that. Okay, so now I've extracted the table header in its own component, and it behaves the same way. Basically I've passed the header prop here, which was used to show the data, and this header prop has all the necessary logic for things like sorting and stuff like that. So we'll use this header prop in a minute. So now let's add a menu in which I will display the options for sorting. Okay, so I've added some markup. So now you can see that I have a menu here for every column. So the way I've displayed the menu is I have applied position relative to the th. Then inside that I have used the menu from Chakra UI. You can use anything, and I position it absolutely, and I've given it a right and top so that it's somewhat in the center of the th and on the right. Then here these are the options. Right now this particular thing is present by default for all columns. I want it to show only when I hover over a particular column. So if I hover over the avatar column, then I want to show this icon, otherwise not. Okay, so I've given this menu a class name of menu, so I'll use that to basically show it based on if I want to hover over the th or not. First of all, I'll say th dot menu visibility is hidden. So now you can see that's not visible. Now I'll say th hover dot menu visibility visible. So basically if I hover over the th, then if there is a thing with the class name menu inside it, then show it. So now if I hover over a particular column, you can see that the icon for that particular column gets shown. So right now I have an option of sort ascending. I want to basically toggle sorting for a particular column based on this option, and I want to show different option based on the current sorting. So if ascending sorting is enabled for a column, I want to show descending, and then vice versa. So for sorting it's pretty simple. I will pass here header dot column dot get toggle sorting handler, and this would basically give me the function for sorting. So if I am here, let's say in id, I click on sort ascending, you can see that now it has sorted in descending order. I click on it again, it has sorted again in ascending order. Based on the current sorting, I also want to change the text here so that it's visible to me like what is happening with this particular column. So for getting the current sorting state, I will say is sorted is equal to header dot column dot get is sorted. So basically if you hover over it, you will see that it can be either false or sort direction. So it can be false ASC ascending or DESC descending. Based on the is sorted variable, I will show if the text should say sort ascending or descending. So I'll say is sorted is equal to descending if, then show sort ascending, otherwise show sort descending. So now let me refresh this table. When I click on sort descending, it sorts in descending order. When I click on sort ascending, it sorts in ascending order. Great. Now I would also want to add the arrows here. So if it has been sorted in descending order, I want to show an up arrow icon here along with the header text, and vice versa. Okay, so I've wrapped it with a flex container so that I can have the arrow icons side by side this header text. So here I would say is sorted and then I will show a box, it's a div. So if it's sorted, then show it. Here I'll say if is sorted is equal to descending order, then show an up icon. If the sorting is ascending order, then show the down icon. Now you can see when I apply sorting, you can see that there is an arrow shown here, and I can also sort in ascending order. It's also changes the arrow icon based on that. Cool. Now I want to add the ability to filter results. So I want that there is a search field, and I add some search term in it, and based on that search term these results get filtered. So let's add that. So as we did with the sorting, we added a sorted row model. For filtering as well, we will have to add a filter row model. So I will do get filtered row model, then I will add a function get filtered row model from the ReactTable library. Now here I would also pass the function which would be called for filtering the results of the table. So I will say filter functions, then fuzzy filter. Basically this is a function which is present in the other file which I will build. Right now there is no code written in it. Also I will add this fuzzy filter function in global filter function. So fuzzy filter means that the search term doesn't have to match exactly with anything. Even if it matches like a little bit with the result, it would keep it and not filter it out. So this is the fuzzy filter function. Let's write the code for it. It's very simple. So what I want to do is I will say const item rank is equal to rank item. So rank item is basically a function we're getting from Tanstack match sorter utils, another Tanstack library. Then here I will say row.getValue. I'll pass in the column ID, and here I'll pass in the value which I'm getting as a param. Then I will add this item rank in the add meta function I'm getting as a param. And then I'll return item rank dot pass. So what it would do is I will add a search term in the search field. I will call the fuzzy filter function. If the fuzzy filter is passed for whatever row, it would return true for it, and then that particular result would stay. All the other would be filtered out. So let's add the search input and then use the tables functions so that I can apply the search filter functionality. Okay, so I've added a search input. Right now if I type anything, nothing would happen because I've added the filter function in the on change. Let's add that. So here I will say table.set global filter, and then I'll pass the value. So whatever value I'm getting in the on change function. Now if I type something, let's say I type Samara, you can see that only this row is present here. If I let's say type something else, let's say cell, you can still see that even though the results don't exactly match with cell, they are still present here because there is somewhat similarity based on whatever algorithm you used from Tanstack. If you want, you can make your own filter function and it should return a boolean value. So for records for which it would return true, those records will stay, otherwise it would filter them out. Okay, so right now there are only 5 records present, but if there are more records like 1000 etc, I would want that there is pagination added. So let's say I crank this number up to 1000. You can now see that there are 1000 records, and this obviously is not an optimized solution. First of all, I would like to make this header sticky because this header goes along with the rows, so we should make it sticky. So for making it sticky, I will do style, position should be sticky, top should be 0, and the index should be 2, and now you can see that the header sticks. Cool. Now let's add pagination. Okay, so I've added a pagination component here which is present here. I will basically add some icon buttons with arrows, and then I will add the logic for pagination. As with sorting and filtering, just like we added the models for those, we also need to add the model for pagination. So I will say get paginated row model, and then I will import the paginated row model from the Tanstack ReactTable library. As I added the get paginated row model property in the hook, you can see that now the records have shrunk. So by default the page size is 10. So now only 10 records are being shown. As you can see, the ID is 9, but right now I don't have any functionality for moving to the next page, etc. That I will add. Right now I also added these 4 buttons simply by using the icon button component of Chakra, and I also pass some icons. So basically what I want is when I click on this button, I go to the first page. When I click on this button, I go to the previous page. When I click on this button, I go to the next page. When I click on this button, I go to the last page. So we'll basically use the table variable to do that. So let's add that as a prop. So pagination, I'll say table is equal to table. And then here, let me add the table prop. And then this would be table. Let's get the table property. And let's pass the user property here. So now I've got the table variable. Now let's use its methods to add the respective functions through which we can move between pages. So the most simple thing, if you want to go to the first page, we'll say table.firstPage. Similarly, if I want to go to the last page, I'll copy it and paste it here. We'll do last page. So let's try that. If I click on this, you can see that I am in the last page because there are 1000 records and the ID is 999. If I click on this particular button, I go to the first page. because this was the first page initially. So that is good. Now let's add the functions for going one page back and forward. So that is simple as well. For going to the previous page, we have to call table.previous page, and then for going to the next page, I will use next page function. So now you can see that I can go to one page forward and backward, and you can see that the page size is 10. Now if I am on the first page, I obviously cannot go to the first page because I'm already on the first page. Also, if I'm on the first page, I can't go one page back. So if I'm on the first page, I want to disable these two buttons. If I am on the last page, I want to disable these two buttons. So we can basically check that using the table variable as well. So here I will say is disabled is equal to table.get can previous page. So if I cannot get previous page, means I am on the first page, then I want to make it disabled. Similarly, I would paste it here as well. Now you can see that these two buttons are disabled because we are on the first page. If I go to the next page, then these buttons become enabled. If I again go to the first page, these buttons get disabled as well. Similarly, for these two buttons, there is another method, get can next page. Same here. Let me copy and paste it. So now if I go to the last page, these two buttons get disabled. If I go to the first page, these two buttons get disabled. Cool. Now I also want to show which page I am on, because right now I am making guesses that the ID is starting from 0, so it must be page 1, but still I want to basically show that these are the number of pages and I am on this specific page. So let's add that. So here I'll say page table dot get state dot pagination dot page index. So basically whatever the current page I'm on, let's add +1 to it. And then here I'll say table dot get page count. So basically this would give us the number of pages we have currently for that table. Now you can see that it says page 1 of 100. Cool. I go to the next pages and this particular number is incrementing. If I go to the last page, it says page 100 of 100. If I go to the first page, it says page 1 of 100. Great. Now let's add the ability of selecting rows. Right now I can click on these checkboxes, but nothing is happening. So I want the ability to select rows, and I also want the ability to know which rows are selected so that I can do some operation with it, like send the rows to the backend, etc. So let's add that. First of all, for enabling selection, we will pass a property. So enable row selection, and then I'll pass true here. You can also pass a function which would get the user object as a param, and you can return true or false based on if you want to enable selection for certain rows. But right now I want to enable selection for all rows, so I pass true. Now basically we'll want to add the selection logic here in these checkboxes so that the rows actually get selected. Okay, so in the header I want the ability to select or deselect all the rows. So if I click on the checkbox in the header, I want that all the rows get selected. If I click on it again, I want that all the rows get deselected. So here I'll say on change. So I'll get the table here as a prop, and here I'll write table.get toggle all rows selected handler. Here I will say is checked is equal to table.get is all rows selected. So basically this would return true if all rows are selected, otherwise false. Now let's add the logic in the checkbox for a particular row. For a cell, I would get the row from here. Here I'll say on change is equal to row.get toggle selected handler. So this is just for a single row. And here I'll say is checked is equal to row dot get is select. Okay, so now you can see that if I click on this checkbox, all the rows get selected. If I click on it again, they get deselected. Also, I can select or deselect particular rows. Now I also want to add this functionality that when I click on a particular row, this checkbox icon in the header gets a indeterminate symbol, so minus, which means that some rows are selected, not all. So here I'll say is indeterminate table dot get is some rows selected. So now you can see that if one of the rows is selected, some rows, not all, then it would show a minus icon. If none of the rows are selected, it would show that it's empty. Also for all, it would show a check icon. So that is good, but I also want to change the background of a particular row so that I can prominently know that this row is selected. So here in the row, I have this function get is row selected, through which I can see if the row is selected or not. So I will add the style here. So I'll say background if row dot get is selected, then it should be a particular navy blue color, so 161654, otherwise it should be white like it is right now. And color, if row dot get is selected, so if the row is selected, then the color of the text should be white, otherwise black like it right now is. Now if I go and I select a particular row, now you can see that it gets a pretty cool selection color. Great. Also, you would want to do something with the selected rows. Obviously, you don't want to just show on the UI. Maybe you want to send them to the backend, or store them on the front end, etc. So you can get the selected rows, currently selected rows, using table.getSelectedRow model. So I've console logged it, and you can see right now there are 4 rows selected. So it says that there are 4 rows, and these are basically the objects we have. This original object is basically the object which we are displaying on the table and was passed as the data in the hook, and we can do something with it. Also, if let's just select something else, you can see that now the rows number is 5, etc. Now I would like to add the logic for deleting a particular row. Right now there is no on click handler, so nothing happens, but now I want that when I click on this delete button, I am able to delete a particular row. So the way we can do it's pretty simple. I have this users array which I'm passing as the data in the table component as a state, and this data is being passed in the useReactTable hook. So what I want to do is, whenever I click on the delete button for a particular row, I basically filter it out and update the state. So that is pretty simple. Let's add that. First of all, we'll get the row from here. Here I'll add an on click function, set data. Here inside it I will get the previous data, and I will return previous data dot filter, and it would be user dot id should not be equal to row dot original dot id. So basically row dot original has the original object, so whenever I would click on a particular delete icon, it would get the id and I would filter that out and update the state. So now let's say if I click on this button, delete button, you can see that the id is 0 and name is Samara, etc. I click on it, it gets deleted, and I can click on any delete button and I can delete a particular row. Pretty cool functionality, but I was able to implement that easily. Now I want to add the ability of displaying a detail of a particular row or adding subcomponents. So right now if I click on this plus icon, nothing is happening. I want to add a functionality where if I click on the plus icon, I should show the detail of that particular row beneath it. So let's add that. Okay, so first of all we have to add a function here. So get can row expand. So basically this would be a function which would return true based on whatever user we are getting here. Just like in case of enable row selection, you can pass a function. I will return true for all rows because I want to add this ability for all rows, but if you want to add this functionality for certain cases, you can do that. So I'm getting the row here. So first of all, I want to show this plus icon in case I want to show it. So I will add a conditional thing here. So I'll say row dot get can expand. So if it can expand, then show the icon, otherwise don't show anything. Here in the on click of this button, I'll say row dot get toggle expanded handler. This would basically toggle the expansion. Here I want to show the plus and minus button based on if the row is expanded or not. So I'll use the get is expanded function. If it has already been expanded, then I will use the fa minus icon, otherwise fa plus. So these are the plus and minus icons basically I'm getting from React icons. Okay, so the way I can show a detail is I will basically first of all add a fragment here, and then I will basically add a row below it if the get is expanded for that particular row is true. So I will add another row. Here I'll say row dot get is expanded. So if it's expanded, then show that, and inside that I'll pass a td, and its call span would be row dot get visible cells dot length. So whatever the number of visible cells is, I want this cells column span to be that, so that I can show it in full width. Now here right now let's display a dummy, something dummy, like some dummy text, and let's see if it works. So if I click on this icon, I'm showing something. I click on this icon, I click on this particular icon. So basically you can see that it's basically showing a row below the row in which I am clicking that particular plus icon, and it is toggling. So that is working. But now I want to show a proper component here so that I can display something meaningful. Okay, so I made a component row detail view. Now I would like to pass the user I get for that particular row. So I'll say user and then row dot original. So row dot original's type is basically user. So basically this is the original object. I will save it. I will add a prop here. So user should be of type user. Okay, so I've got some basic markup here. Let's display the data for the user. So I'll say source is equal to user.avatar. We know that there's an avatar URL. Then the height should be 100%. The width should be 100%. And basically the container has a width of 150. So it would take the 150 width. Here I want to display, let's say, the name. So I'll say user.name. Here I want to display the age. User.age. Below that I want to show the date of birth, so DOB. Then I'll wrap the date with moment so that I can format it. So user.birthdate.format ddmmyy. So now if I click on a plus icon for a particular row, you can see that it expands and it displays the information for that particular user. Great. Okay, so now let's add the logic for pinning the columns. Okay, so for adding the pinning logic, we will add options here, just like we have an option for sorting here. So let me copy and add 3 more items. So basically this would be responsible for pin to right. This would be responsible for pinning to left. So I'll write left here, and here this would be responsible for unpinning the particular column. Okay, so for pinning to the right, I will basically use the pin function and pass right here. So we can do 3 things. We can either pin to the right, left, or unpin. So not pinned at all. So right now, all the columns are not pinned, so they will have a value of false. Same thing here, but I will pass left here. Same thing here, but I will pass false here. So basically these are the options. Now I want to show them conditionally. So if a column is already pinned to the right, I don't want to show pin to the right option, but I want to show pin to the left or unpin. Similarly, if a particular column is not pinned at all, I want to show both options, so stuff like that. So for that, I will make a variable, just like I have one for sorting. I will say const is pinned is equal to header dot column dot get is pinned. Is pinned would basically be either false or right or left. So here I will say if is pinned is not equal to right, then show this. If is pinned is not equal to left, then show this. And similarly for unpin, if is pinned has some value, it's not false, then show the unpin, otherwise not. So now let's see it in action. I have the ID here. Now I have the options of pin to right, pin to left. Let's pin to right. You can see that it goes to the right. If I go here, I click pin to left, it goes to the left. If I want to unpin it, it would basically go to the same position it was before. Cool, it is working now. Now I want to show a particular color in the column so that we can know that this column wasn't originally present in this place. It has been pinned. So I want to show a purplish color in the header. Let's add that. Okay, so I've copied a particular purplish color. So here I'll say I will add it conditionally. So is pinned and I want to spread it. So if is pinned is true, then I want to say that the background color should be equal to this color. So now let's pin it. So pin it to the right. Now you can see that it has a purplish color, which means that it's pinned. I can also pin it to the left. I can pin this to the right. I can pin this to the left, and I can also unpin columns. Now let's add the logic for showing or hiding particular columns in the table. Okay, so for column visibility, we have to add an initial state here which shows that which particular column should be shown by default. So for that, the initial state for column visibility has to be in the shape of an object where the key is the column ID and the value is true or false. So if I want to show it by default, it should be true, otherwise false. So basically we'll build that object from this columns array we're getting. So first of all, I want to create a column IDs variable because I would also need that. So use memo columns.map column.id, as string. So basically this gives us an array with all the IDs of all the columns. I will use it in this feature as well, so I need it. Now I want to build that object, which I will pass as the initial state. So I will say column visibility is equal to use memo and return column IDs dot reduce. So I will use the reduce function to basically create an object from this array. So accumulator value, the accumulator would be an object where the key would be a string, the value would be a boolean, and I would return the accumulator, and for every iteration I would add the ID and assign a value of true. So basically this gives us an object with all the IDs of all columns and assigned true to all. So initially I want all the columns to be shown, so I will say initial column visibility, also return the column IDs because I would need it. Here in the table I would get this initial column visibility variable here, and I will pass initial state column visibility. Let's add the component which will display a popover with the columns and checkboxes and everything. Okay, so I've made a column visibility selector component here, and you can see it here in action. Right now it just displays 2 radio buttons and no checkboxes. So let's add the logic for displaying checkboxes for each individual column. So I'm passing the column IDs here as a prop. I'm getting the column IDs here. So I will basically iterate over the column IDs and use the column IDs to basically show the checkboxes. So here I'll say column IDs.map column ID, then a checkbox with an ID of column ID. Then inside the checkbox I want to show a particular label. So here I'll say use this function convert camel to title case, because the column IDs I have in camel case, I want to basically change them into title case so that they can be used as labels for the checkboxes. Now basically I will add the logic for these radio buttons first. So if I click on show none, I want to hide all the columns, so basically hide the table. If I click on show all, I want to basically show the entire table. Okay, so inside this radio group I would get a value, and this value would be either all or none. So I will use the table.set column visibility function. Again, as I told you previously, the column visibility object the Tanstack Table library expects is an object with column IDs as keys and true or false as values. So basically based on that it would show or hide the columns. Let me copy this because it's almost similar. So I'll place it here, and instead of true here I will say value is equal to all. So basically what it would do is if value selected, the radio button selected is all, then it would set true for all the column IDs. If it's not all, if it's none, then it would set false as the value for all column IDs. So let's see it in action. I click on show none, the entire table gets disappeared. Cool. I click on show all, the entire table gets visible. That is great. Now let's add the logic for individual column visibility. Again, the logic for that would be similar. I will add it here. So selected options is basically an array of the checkboxes which have been selected. So I will just do selected options dot includes val. So if the selected options includes the current value of the column ID, then I want to return true for it, otherwise false. Okay, so now you can see that I am checking and unchecking particular checkboxes, and the columns are basically showing and hiding. That's pretty cool. Now I've also added a functionality where if I click on show none and show all, the checkboxes get selected because of that. So basically I have used the table.getState.column visibility. So column visibility obviously will get in the form of an object with keys as column IDs and values as booleans. We'll use that to basically extract an array of column IDs which are visible only. So I'm filtering it based on value, and then I'm basically just getting the key because object.entries gives us key and a value as an array, and then I will basically pass it here in the value. So whenever I would change the column visibility through the radio button as well, it would basically reflect here, which is great. Okay, so the final and most complex thing is adding the reordering or drag and drop ability to the columns. Now I am using React Beautiful D&D for this because it's intuitive and it's basically meant for reordering of vertical horizontal lists. You can use any library you want. The Tanstack library itself has used D&D toolkit in the documentation, but you can use any library you want. I won't go through in depth in how React Beautiful D&D works because there are a lot of drag and drop libraries and a lot of things in React Beautiful D&D are just, you just have to copy and paste them because they are related to the drag and drop logic and you don't have to really learn them in any sense. But still, I will just give you an overview of what I am doing regarding the drag and drop. However, the reordering logic using the Tanstack Table library, I will look at it in depth. Okay, so just like for column visibility, we had to specify an initial state. We have to also specify an initial state for column order. So I'll just do column order and then column IDs. So basically the column IDs are in a particular order, obviously, in which I define them. So column order expects an array of strings. So basically that defines the order of the columns. So right now, whatever the column order is, I've specified it as the initial order. Now I've copied pasted the logic for drag drop because there is a lot of code with React Beautiful D&D and it would have taken ages, but I will explain it in a much simple sense. So first of all, we have the drag drop context. So whenever we have to drag and drop in React Beautiful D&D, we have to wrap that particular area with the drag drop context. It's like a provider, just like we have a provider in case of Redux, etc. So you have to wrap it, and then you have an on drag and function. Whenever a drop would occur inside this drag drop context, this particular function would get called, and I will get back to this in a minute. Then we have a droppable. So droppable is the area in which I want to drop a particular stuff. Pretty simple. Now these things, the spreading of refs, etc. and props, all these things basically enable the drag and drop. So these props are related to styling and adding the necessary refs so that the background logic of drag and drop work. Now within the table header, I've also added the draggable logic. So droppable was the area in which I can drop. If I wrap something with draggable, then that particular thing becomes draggable, just like the word suggests. Here I've given a draggable ID, so unique ID, so header.id, then a key, then the index of that particular column. Then I am disabling the drag if it's pinned. Obviously, if a column is pinned, I don't want to enable drag. Then again, I have spread lots of different props. No need to pay attention to that. Then, some styling issues. Also, if I'm dragging, I want that particular column header is gray, simple stuff. Now, when I do drop a particular column, I basically want to reorder columns. So here in this on drag function, I get the destination and source. So I basically, through the destination and source objects, get the index of the source and destination. So if I, let's say, drag a particular header from a particular index and I drop at a particular index, I get the two indices of destination and source, and using those I can reorder and shuffle the column order. I can update the column order, and then when the column order would be updated by this table.setColumnOrder function, the column order would change. So basically this reorder function is simple. It's basically shuffling the two items based on these two indices, and I'm basically setting the column order based on the updated items list. So now you can see that I can drag and drop columns. Great. If I make a particular column pinned, I can drag it. Otherwise, I can drag and drop columns wherever I want. Okay, so this was the complete course for Tanstack Table, where I covered a lot of different functionalities in as much less time as possible. And you can see how using Tanstack Table, you can make powerful, feature-rich and beautiful tables, and you can customize them as much as you like. If you like the tutorial, make sure to smash the like button and subscribe to the channel because it motivates me to make more courses and videos. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.